Morning, everyone. My name is Rob Morandi. I'm one of the student organizers for the conference, and it's my pleasure to introduce Mike Zarin, David Sparks, and John Borders, whose presentation is entitled "A Step in the Right Direction: The Positive Effects a Sports Team Can Have on Public Education." Thank you.
What's up, everybody? Good morning. We're very excited to be here to be presenting what we think is the first. We think it's the first statistically significant evidence of a sports team having an impact in conjunction with a bunch of local partners on a public school system. So it's pretty cool. The genesis of this program, which is called Step Your Game Up, happened when Judy Pagliuca, whose family owns a significant portion of the Celtics, came to us a few years ago, and she said she wanted to fund a brand new community program that we weren't doing before, and she had 3 goals. The first was to affect middle school students, and we'll tell you later why this particular group. And it wasn't just any middle school students. Particularly, she wanted this program to be targeted directly at the set of middle school students who are most at risk of failing in middle school and high school. The second thing she said to us is she wanted to create a program that was objectively measurable, used objective data so that we could track the effects of the program and see if the money was being spent well. And also be able to adjust the program as it went on based on whatever it was that we were tracking. And the last goal she had was kind of an interesting sort of introspective goal. She sort of said, sports teams have all these different sets of expertise inside them. They're not big businesses. The Celtics have like 120 employees. But we have this data group that has this interesting set of expertise that's usually spent looking at basketball. And she thought it would be interesting to sort of pair that with the amazing expertise of our community group in putting together programs that inspire kids. So we put together a program. We sort of thought this lent itself well to an incentivization-based structure. That was kind of the hot thing in behavioral economics at the time. Everything from the book Nudge to the Bolsa Familia in Brazil. These are programs where people get given incentives to modify their behavior in positive ways, and generally they respond to it. So we put together this program in conjunction with the amazing help of the Lawrence, Massachusetts school system and the Pagliuca Foundation, and it's pretty cool. So we're going to present to you, first we got John Borders from our community group here, who's going to talk about how the program works, how it's set up, and then David Sparks from our basketball data group is going to show the results of the study that we did to show the impact of the program. And then we'll give a few takeaways at the end and take a few questions. So without further ado, here's John.
Well, thank you so much for the introduction. Good morning, everyone. Again, my name is John Matthew Borders IV, and I'm truly honored to stand here before you this morning representing the 17-time world champion Boston Celtics and the Office of Community Engagement, and uniquely falling under the umbrella of corporate partnerships. I know there are some other teams represented, so I had to throw that 17-time in there. It's a pretty cool thing to be a kid from inner city Boston and to be able to stand here, Dorchester to be exact, and to be able to stand here with ideas of making it to the big stage one day. And now I get to leverage a multi-billion-dollar brand to give back to my neighborhood. I get to tell kids every day I made it to the league without taking a shot, so I think that's pretty cool. In my role, I'm fortunate enough to oversee the team's educational initiatives. I share this because of the impactful initiatives we have as an organization, whether it be in the arts and mentoring space, the infrastructure and renovation, health and fitness, military, volunteer, relief efforts, whatever it is. This group in particular is one of the highest risk. Middle schoolers, many of whom are identified as living in poverty and coming from underserved communities. For a little bit of context, in the United States of America, 75% of prison inmates are high school dropouts. High school dropouts are 72% more likely to be unemployed than high school graduates. With middle school attendance and grades being the best predictor of high school dropout rates, improvements in grades and attendance in middle school are associated with better high school outcomes, and even among students with similarly poor starting points. Now to take a deeper dive into the Step Your Game Up program. We've been able to find some statistical evidence to support what we already know. When you have those who are influencers, in our case professional athletes, leverage their celebrity, people respond. Our equation is fairly simple. We identify a school district with students struggling in their core courses of math and ELA, or English Language Arts, In addition to those struggling with attendance, we offer them incentives to improve these challenge areas from people with influence, i.e. the Boston Celtics. And once they reach their goals, we create opportunities for them to redeem their effort in the form of exclusive experiences, swag, and more. In the end, again, we leverage the expertise of our basketball analysts to measure the impact of our partnership while working to improve the model. Identifying these at-risk students. With the assistance of our partners at the district level, we take the first marking period of the school year to objectively identify students eligible for the program based on their attendance and their coursework. Those struggling with attendance have been identified as being chronically absent or attending school less than 90% of the time, while those struggling with coursework have been identified as to have a C- or below in math and/or ELA. After the students have been objectively identified, they're offered a symbolic contract from the Boston Celtics. This is where we leverage the cachet of our players and our brand. Each student who's eligible to participate in the program is sent a personalized letter from one of our players challenging them essentially to step their game up. Accompanied with this letter is a contract stating that if said student meets their goals, whether it be in attendance or coursework, they will earn tickets to games, earn Celtic swag, and earn exclusive experiences that money can't buy. And to be totally honest, if we had to put a price tag on a lot of these items and experiences, this is a demographic that typically could not afford these. If students decide not to sign the contract and they do not participate in this program, we identify those students as opt-outs. For those students who decide to sign their contracts and will participate in the program, obviously those are opt-ins. This is essential because now, you don't only have the student buying in, but you have, as you see on the contract, a place for a principal or a teacher to sign this contract, so there's a level of accountability at the school level, and then you also have a parent or guardian sign the contract as well. Knowing that there's diversity within this market, we also have our contracts translated into whatever language the district needs. The students, again, that enroll within this program for attendance must be present for 90% of the time, and those students, for more than 90% of the time, and then the students enrolled for coursework have to bring their grade up at least one full letter grade in order to receive the incentives. One of the things that's really cool about this experience is our signing day kickoff. Every athlete, whether you've played Pee-wees or at the collegiate level, dreams about being drafted. That one opportunity where your name is called, you get to walk across stage, shake the hand of the commissioner, and for the very first time, you get to put on your team's hat. Now, you do that, but most times, they'll even let you hold up your team's jersey. And then we've taken it a step further by bringing this to step your game up. Hat for anyone? Not sure who would want this. There we go. Oh, he got you, man. The thing that's really cool about our signing day experience is not only is it another touch point that we're able to engage with the students and talk a little bit more about the program, talk about the incentives, talk about the expectations, but we're also able to engage the parents, the guardians, the friends, as well as the administrators and those at school who will actually carry this thing out. Tracking outcomes. Again, we cannot stress the importance of having a relationship at the district level. Kristen Rice-Sullivan is here on behalf of Lawrence Public Schools, and can't thank you enough for all your work. We would not be standing here without you. From the district level, you have to get buy-in from the district. And this means that they would be giving you the essential data that you need in a timely fashion and in the manner in which you need it. Another key would be that we are not asking them to analyze the data. We do that internally. For most school districts, they wouldn't necessarily have the capacity or the resources to do this, so we do it internally. At the school level, we just desire to be a tool in the tool belt of educators. We understand that as the Boston Celtics, we have assets that we can leverage. And if we are a little Celtics carrot that you can dangle in front of a kid to bring his or her grades up or get them to come to school, then it's worth it. One of the things that we try to drive home is with the traditional consumer exchange. If you want to attend a Celtics game, you give us cash for a ticket. If you want a T-shirt or a hat, again, you would exchange cash for those goods. In this case, the currency is effort. It's our philosophy as it relates to the community engagement program to lean on the expertise of our partners while, again, leveraging our Celtics assets to drive community impact, which Dave Sparks will speak about in 2 seconds. In terms of rewards, a show of hands in the crowd, do we have any parents here? Got a couple. Any parents that have children that wear a size 3? Do you know offhand? Come on, man, parenting. Y'all supposed to know what size you should. Anywho, we got one? We got one? Dad? You bring it over. Go home, ask your child if they've cleaned their room, if they've taken out the trash, whatever you need them to do, and incentivize them with these Step Your Game Up slides. Tell them Uncle John sent it. Absolutely, man. Couple giveaways. Again, these exclusive experiences, these are things that typically, unless you were working for the Boston Celtics, you would not have access to these. Excuse me. In addition to the larger incentives, we have what we call interim challenges, which are shorter-term challenges, trying to keep the students motivated so that as they're working towards the larger goals of being able to go to games and attend exclusive parties with our players, whether it be after school or an on-court shoot-around after a game, these smaller interim challenges are things to keep the students motivated on a shorter term. Again, it is critical, and we can't drive this point home enough, it's critical to have a great relationship with the school district because there are often conflicts in trying to work through the scheduling of all these events, whether it be our game schedule, whether it be the school having a testing period or their school calendar. So that relationship with the district is key. To drive it all home, we find that if you have committed but underachieving students and you have a school district that is compassionate, caring, invested, and they have the capacity and the infrastructure to support said partnership, we then provide the incentives for improvement, and you have positive educational outcomes. It's one thing for me to talk about, but another for you to actually see what Step Your Game Up looks like when it comes to life. You could play the video.
Oh, no music? We get some music.
Imagine.
It has some audio to it.
Uh-oh. You don't want to hear us try and sing along.
I was going to, man. I was 2 seconds away from starting. I love it still.
That's Leon Poe talking at the signing day event.
Boston Garden.
Kids coming to the game. You get to shoot around on the court after the game. It's pretty fun.
Imagine peppy, upbeat, inspiring music.
Literally. Without further ado, Boston Celtics Director of Basketball Analytics, Dr. David Sparks.
So as John alluded to, there are basically 3 different outcome measures that we're interested from a data perspective, and those are attendance, average daily attendance, English language arts grades, math grades. There are 3 periods where we have data. The first period is when we establish whether students are eligible for the program, and then we compare their performance in period 2 and 3 to their initial grades. Since we're interested in identifying the effect of Step Your Game Up, specifically we need to sort of divide the students into several subgroups and compare across those groups. In Lawrence Public Schools, there are about 1,500 students whose grades and attendance were high enough that they were not eligible for the program. But there are about 800 who were offered the opportunity to join. Of those 800, about 350 decided to not do signing day, not get the contract signed by their parents, and not participate. But there were about 450 who did. The single most straightforward thing you could imagine doing is literally taking grades in period 2 and 3, subtracting those from grades in period 1 in attendance, and comparing across subgroups to see who looks best. However, this is not sufficient. I encourage you to ignore the slide. You can imagine if you were designing a study, you would possibly randomize across the entire population of students, across all levels of grades and attendance, and offer some subset of students randomly the opportunity to enroll and some not. However, we were interested in actually identifying and helping the students who needed it the most. So we deliberately chose students who were underperforming in period 1 to try to encourage them to bring their grades up. So what this means is we can't just directly compare averages over the course of the year. One of the main reasons is something called regression to the mean. I'm sure you're familiar with regression to the mean. It happens in basketball and lots of different domains. This is an example from last NBA season where the 200 most prolific NBA three-point shooters are displayed on the left, as this is on the left side is the first third of the season, their three-point shooting. And on the right side, all of those lines are trending toward their full season average. So as you can see, there's sort of a funneling effect where looking over a larger time period, shooting tends to shrink toward the global mean. I do want to point out that this gentleman at the very bottom on the left is Celtics legend and Community Service Award winner Evan Turner, who was asked about his 15% three-point shooting. He said, yes, but it is a big 15%. And he did manage to bring it up to a robust 24 by the end of the season. So anyway, we see regression toward the mean in all different contexts, including one school in Lawrence chose not to participate in Step Your Game Up. So each of these lines represents students who received an A, B, C, D, or F in the first period. And then the lines slope toward that group's average over the full year. And as you can see, there is some slope toward the global mean in both periods, or both subjects. We control for this statistically. We can't just take averages, but it's a fairly straightforward model, and this is the only model formula I'm going to put up today. Basically what this says is the probability of ELA grades improving from period 1 to period 2 is a function of your initial grades. This is another reason we need a model, because it's harder to improve your grades if you're doing well to start. And then attendance and to start. And then 2 program-related variables. So rather than show 6 different model output tables, I've summarized them all in one. And superficially, what we're looking for is this eligible and enrolled coefficient to be positive and distinct from 0. As you can see, in every case, it is positive, and for the grade outcomes, it is distinct from 0. A statistician would say that it's significant at the 5% interval. Those are 95% confidence regions. What does this mean in terms of actual probabilities? So these plots are simulations drawn from the model, and the y-axis is the probability of improving from period 1 to period 2 and 3. And the x-axis is the whole range, or a large range, of initial measures for each student. As you can see, as you would expect, the higher your initial value, the less likely it is for you to improve, which makes sense. Also, I'd draw your attention to the fact that the model suggests that students who are enrolled in the program, the green massive lines, are everywhere higher on probability than the students in the black massive lines. And this is just reflection of the model's finding that students who are enrolled in the program, if given the opportunity to, outperform those who chose not to enroll. So what does this mean in terms of specific numbers? If we zoom in on typical students who are getting, who are attending 93% of the time in the first period and averaging a D, those students, if 100 such students chose to enroll in Step Your Game Up as opposed to not enrolling in Step Your Game Up, 18 of those would have improved over what you would expect. Just to kind of be more specific, there were 222 students who were offered and signed a contract to enroll for English Language Arts. And so that means the model suggests that 40 more of those students improved their grades over what we would have expected otherwise. So this is 40 human beings who are getting help that they need, and hopefully it will help their high school performance and their long-term life outcomes. So those things, it persisted to some extent in period 3. In math, we saw smaller but still significant increases. And in attendance, we saw increases, although they were not significantly different from those who did not enroll. Another way of thinking about a similar thing is instead of just was there any increase at all, we can look at the magnitude of change from period 1 to later periods. This graph just summarizes a set of similar models. And in this case, the green coefficients represents students who chose to enroll, the black students who chose not to enroll. And in every case, you can see the green coefficients are higher. Numerically, this is almost a half a grade increase, relative increase for students who chose to enroll over students who didn't. And in math, it was a smaller but still significant increase. And in attendance, it was a positive but not significant increase. And I do want to mention that looked across gender, race, free or reduced lunch status, and there was no significant differential impact in those groups.
So it's worth noting there's probably also some non-measurable, non-easily measured over the short-term effects here too. One of the points that Judy makes very frequently when she talks about this program is that kids learn the confidence to have signed up, to have committed to doing something, and then having followed through on it. And that's something that may persist even longer than these effects. Although, again, we only have a short period of time right now on which we have data. We'll be tracking it over long periods of time to see what happened. We think this is a kind of program that other teams can leverage. We like to think we're special at the Celtics, but this sort of thing ought to work for any organization, or particularly any sports team that has strong leverage with kids. If you should happen to be in Norman, Oklahoma, maybe it's the Sooners, I don't know. But here, the Celtics seem to be able to do something here that maybe other funding organizations in public education can't do. So here are some thoughts for other people thinking about doing a program like this. First of all, we just can't stress enough the importance of having a stable funding partner and school system engagement. And Judy and Kristen are here. You guys should stand up for a second, because it's really cool. But both of these organizations are just super committed to this. One of the reasons we were excited to work with Lawrence as opposed to other school systems is Lawrence is a small city outside of Boston, but it has many of the same challenges that a big urban school system has. It's just a smaller urban school system. And those kinds of cities tend to get left out when all the big universities do studies on things, all the big funders do things. And so they were just particularly engaged in this program, and we were very excited to work with them. It's also worth noting that obviously, like any experiment, any of the data people in the room will tell you, experimental design is really crucial. And so setting up your program in a way that's measurable before you start, it's really important. The marking periods have to line up with when your games are. If your season's during the summer, it's going to be difficult to provide events at a game. There's also some literature that suggests that activity-based incentives, like reading a certain number of books, as opposed to outcome-based incentives like your grades, are more effective in this. And that's actually one reason why we have those interim challenges, which are more specific activities that the kids have to do during the course of this program. But regardless, whatever criteria you're using to pick people for the program or to determine if they've succeeded, it's got to be something super objective and measurable, or else you can't do a study like David's just presented. It's also worth noting that, and this is where Kristen's been a huge help, I'm told. I'm sort of just kind of at the side of this. These guys do the work. But if you don't get good data, all of this is not very useful. You can't find out if you're having an effect. You need data on other things besides just the outcomes, because you have to control for all those other things that David was talking about. Probably the best takeaway from this thing is, it turns out that if you have a committed school system, a great funding partner, and some committed, hardworking folks at a team that can leverage the excitement that a sports team provides, you actually can have a statistically significant impact on a big bunch of people's lives. So with that, we'd like to say thank you again to Lawrence, Massachusetts School System and the Palyuka Family Foundation. We have a slide showing their logos. And if there's any questions, we'll be happy to take them. Thanks for coming. Yeah.
Hi. So Coach Stevens was brought in like in the past 2 or 3 years of the upslope for the Celtics, as you know. Have you observed any differences either in level of buy-in or in effectiveness of this program as the team has improved?
So it's a very good question. And the question for people watching online, because there's no mics down here, is have we observed an improvement in the buy-in to the program since Brad Stevens has gotten here and the team's gotten better? And the answer is it's just too early. We've only been doing this program with Lawrence for 1.5 years now. So, hopefully we'll stay good for a while and we won't find out if it gets worse as we get worse. Two questions here. First here and then there.
How are you guys able to communicate like the broader importance of like the lesson you're teaching? In other words, like how are you kind of offboarding after graduating? What's your plan in terms of like once they leave middle school?
So the question is, what's the follow-up on this program afterwards? Do you want to talk about that? Should I? You want?
Yeah.
So this is early. It's a new program that we've just started. We're talking a lot about how to follow up on these students. Certainly as they progress through middle school, we can keep getting data on them. We're not sure what we're going to do after that, but it's worth noting, like what John said, is we're just one tool in the toolkit of the school. So hopefully the school systems, they're the expert educators. We're sort of expert, these guys are sort of expert motivators. Dave Hoffman's the head of our community relations staff. He's here too. Those guys are really good at exciting kids and getting them hyped up about things. The longer lessons are going to fall somewhat more on the school system, I think, but that's not to duck our responsibility here. We've talked to them a lot and are going to continue to talk about ways to track the effect of this going forward.
And certainly, I'd be interested in seeing the same students through middle school, whether their grades persist in being different from those who didn't enroll.
Once a student has achieved their goal with incentives, how do you help them or plan to help them maintain that goal without incentives?
Yeah, so it's kind of, I think that's sort of the same question. The question is, how are we going to help the students continue to maintain their goals without incentives? The one effect I was talking about at the very end, right after David was speaking, I think is really important there, which is hopefully these kids are kids who are really failing. They're really struggling at school. These aren't kids who are getting B-minuses. These are kids who are getting Ds and Fs. And the thought that they can sign up to agree to do something and then follow through on it and be successful, hopefully will have a strong effect on them, we hope, for the rest of their lives. But we're going to do a better job going forward. Again, we haven't been doing this that long. To track outcomes like that and see. The beauty of tracking these things is you can look over time and see what happens and change things and then see what effect the changes have because you have a baseline. So we'll be doing that.
Just another thing, just kind of add to your point. One of the things that we also talked about with signing day was this whole concept of community accountability. So we're hoping that they can also lean on their parents, their friends, and the school system to kind of be motivated as they continue to move forward because now they've actually changed and seen results from their change.
Go ahead and back there. Yes, you, sorry. Yes.
So I'll repeat the question and then you guys, but so the question is, half the students didn't opt in. Do we know why? And are there any plans to target those people to get more people to opt in?
So we did not collect data on those students specifically, aside from their attendance and things that were already in the data. I do believe it's non-random, and so potentially problematic in that way. But it's hard to imagine, I mean, without a survey or some other similar instrument getting really down to getting good enough information to model that choice.
Let me make one statistical point and then see what you're going to say. So it's worth noting also that we did have the school where the program didn't happen. And so the outcomes at that school were similar to the opted out students. So we don't think there's a massive selection bias in the study, but that doesn't obviate in any way your point, which is we should try to get more people in the program.
But one of the things with the whole concept of opting in, for some, basketball might not be their thing. These incentives, just tying into the Celtics, this might not be the driver. Some of them, their friends didn't sign up, so they might not want to be a part. This is middle school, so peer pressure is huge. So I mean, there are a number of reasons why that opt-in rate was low.
We have time for one more.
Go ahead, Kate.
So the question is, have we benchmarked this against other programs? And the answer is we looked at a bunch of other programs in designing it, but haven't done a good job yet of comparing it to other programs. There's a big group of people actually at Harvard under the direction of a guy named Roland Fryer who works a lot on this stuff, and we're hoping to talk to him soon about these sorts of things. It's kind of, we all have other things that we do too at the Celtics. So there will be time for that. But I think it's really important to understand, exactly how big this effect is. A half a grade on average across hundreds of kids is a big deal. We think, but maybe we could do better. It's worth checking. Other questions? No, we're done with questions, right? Thank you guys for coming. Really appreciate it.